Hello everyone, I am Matt Williamson. How's it going? It's going well here. A little tired. It's about 1:30 in the morning. Just walked in the door from AccuSure after doing the post-game show. This certainly was not the most thrilling preseason game or football game we've ever seen for professional football. It's funny, my 18-year-old went to the game, a couple of his buddies, and was super psyched. I drove him down, and he texted me a bunch during the game. He's like, I almost forgot how unentertaining preseason football is. And we actually had a caller in the post-game show call in and be like, do we really need 3 of these? You know, I mean, like, across the league, this is becoming a trend. You know, like, it's not a great product. It really isn't. And I really hope people don't look too much into it either. I mean, unless you're breaking down coaches' tape of technique on, all these different things. Remember, these guys did not game plan for one another either. So here we go. I got a bunch of notes, though. That being said, so since we got together last, I mean, this came out right before the game. Herbig's injury sounds like it could be substantial. Coach Tomlin said that he's going to get a second opinion. Maybe we get some good news, but I get the hunch talking to people that he's going to be out quite a while. Now, I think Frazier was taking that job over, and he was one of the bright spots tonight on offense, I thought, at least on first viewing. Again, I only watch these things live. I got to watch them again tomorrow, and we'll do another podcast. But I think they can handle interior offensive line injuries. And please remember, over the last 2 years, this has been the healthiest offensive line in the league. And, Futano's already out for who knows how long, so hopefully these don't compound. But I think they can handle what they have been dealt at this point. So, right off the bat, Josh Allen was going to play, and then they said if it rains and gets nasty, he's not going to. So Trubisky started pretty much with all the other Bills. Kind of had a feeling, right at kickoff, that Cam, Watt, and Highsmith weren't going to play. They didn't. Here's a list of guys that didn't play for the Steelers. Allen, the third-string quarterback. Ramon Wilson. Bishop. Ward, the running back who I've been kind of fond of. Holcomb, of course. Highsmith, Herbig. Futano, Watt, and Cam Hayward. They also didn't play Josh Allen. They didn't play Curtis Samuel. Hamlin, Edwards, Bishop, all their 3 best safeties. Von Miller, Bernard, they didn't play because of the Milano injury, who didn't play. So they were really, really weak at safety and inside linebacker, as we thought. Some injury news you probably have heard, but we don't know a lot on these yet. But Warren had a hamstring. Peyton Wilson had a possible concussion. Averett had a hamstring. All of whom were ruled out. They won't return, as it happened. And then keep an eye on Matakevich, too. He was limping around in the second half and didn't come back either. So, as I mentioned, they're really light at safety and linebacker, the Bills. But they weren't in the D-line. And their D-line whipped up on the Steelers, especially in protection, and especially Rousseau against Broderick Jones. I mean, that was one of the most glaring things, concerning things. Now, I told you, that D-line is loaded with early picks, including Rousseau, Ed Oliver. I mean, these are playmakers. And Rousseau's developing into a star. But this was concerning for Jones. This was a bad game. I mean, there's just no way around that. The first-team offense was severely outplayed. And there's no question about that. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform for your number one source of everything football, from the preseason NFL to college kicking off. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and every even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all 300,000 NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head to our online casino and get on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's capital BLEAV, and get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. Okay, as usual, I just have a bunch of bullet points for the second half of the pod here, as well as some final stats and halftime stats. Just a couple randoms that I thought were telling. So let's talk about Fields. I mean, Impressive, but expected. I mean, for much of the snaps that he was in the second half in particular, he was the best player on the field. You know what I mean? Like, his playmaker and his athleticism against backups that aren't really preparing for him or having a pass rush plan or a specific defense, he was kind of a man amongst boys. Made a big-time play, showing the balance not to go down, that late completion to Fitzpatrick rolling to his left. We've seen Fields throw a lot of nice balls rolling to his left in camp. So I don't want to overreact to that. I mean, we know he's a playmaker, but he wasn't dicing up people with three-step drop ball out, precision quarterbacking. So I thought it was great. I thought it was enticing, but it's also expected. You see what I'm saying? Like, let's not say that he's the best option or any of those things just because of that. So I mentioned Bishop didn't play. Thomas Graham Jr. was basically the number one slot in this game, and I didn't know who he was. I assume they're just being overly cautious with Bishop. That's kind of what Tomlin said afterwards. But if a slight injury to Bishop or a concern of having to keep this guy in bubble wrap is your answer at slot corner, unless Bishop's a lot better than I think he is, that's concerning to me. So I understand you're trying to get to the starting point with the best option available, but that's a little worrisome with me. I like that we saw Peyton Wilson running with the ones, particularly more on throwing downs against 11 personnel. That's great. We saw a rotation there for a while where Graham and Wilson would come in on passing downs for Roberts and Loudermilk. Cool. I think that's all fine. We also saw briefly some of that big nickel that I mentioned with KZ and the two starting safeties. Might we see more of that as an option for slot work because Minka, Elliott, and KZ are all slot capable? So we'll see. They're piecing it together. I just don't know if they're going to show us a lot of that big nickel. There was a sack that Herbig, who I'll talk about here in a minute, and Benton both got credit for, rightfully so. But Ogunjobi created it, and I thought overall the defensive front for the Steelers was every bit as good as the defensive front was for the Bills, even without your three best players in the front. So that was really promising. At one point, I pulled up the stats on ESPN.com, and there was 11:39 left in the second quarter. So we're pretty well into the game. And the Steelers had -5 passing yards. Sacks count as negative yards in the passing game. And I don't know how much later it went than that, but we went well over a quarter with -5 passing yards. Not great. You probably remember Trubisky, making a big mistake. He had that terrible overthrow picked off by Killebrew that probably one of us could have caught. Just a terrible throw. Not a lot to take away there from the Killebrew angle, but we remember that Mitch. I thought this was a fine performance by Frazier on first blush. McCormick as well. And Anderson, to me, is so intriguing because I think now he's probably your backup center with Herbig out of the equation. And I had hardly seen him play tackle in the training camp, but he had a lot of reps at right tackle too. He's a really valuable piece. Ray Davis, powerful rookie Bills running back. Young guy he's came in the league a little older, but he's rookie. Really easy to root for. Cool backstory. You'd love him if he's a Steeler, but he was gouging the Steelers to start the second half. That was a little worrisome too. What about Elliott, speaking of safeties? He played really deep into this game as if they were not thrilled with him. And on a 3rd and 5, he got beat by a big gain by a tight end, Zach Davidson. And I just wrote, who? Who is Zach Davidson? He's like their 5th string tight end. So that wasn't great, but I'm wondering, why was he in there so late? Again, this is a glass half full, glass half empty type of game. And the empty was mostly the offense. The full was the defense and mostly special teams, with the exception of a missed 52-yard field goal. But I thought this was a much better cornerback game overall than the first week of preseason, and the receivers they faced were much less. And I thought it was a really good D-line game, and especially Herbig. I thought Herbig was one of the stars of the show here. Now, the Steelers missed that field goal, and therefore gave the Bills really good field position. A missed field goal, folks, is a turnover, and therefore that was the first scoring drive of the game. It was only a field goal, of course, that's all we saw, but you miss field goals, it usually leads to points the other way. That's turnovers. Okay, here's a topic I almost didn't want to bring up, but this was not a very clean game by the Bills. And if we were doing a Bills post-game podcast, even though they won, I don't think we'd be doing cartwheels either. We'd be like, well, Josh Allen didn't play. But still, this was not a great game by the Bills, or by either team, really. And I wonder, I told you guys what all I saw at that joint practice just 2 days ago. Did that take a lot out of these teams? I mean, that was almost like a game. And then you have to flip over and play a real game, semi-real game, just 2 days later. So I wonder, did that joint practice take a lot more out of both these teams than anybody would ever admit? My hunch is yes. Patterson still is not returning at kickoffs. Are they just going to hide that fact? Are they just going to throw him out there when it matters most? I just thought that was peculiar. I thought he'd be the number one kickoff returner now. I know he is the number one kickoff returner, but I thought he'd be running with the one, so to speak. Coletto, the fullback, was out there a fair amount, but he wasn't out there with the ones as much as I would want on special teams to make me think that he's a shoo-in to make this team. You can look at that as not being a great sign. Johnston, the punter, was unbelievable in this game. He was so good. And the entire punt team, I thought, was outstanding. They had one big return, which he basically just outkicked the coverage. But he's been everything I've been cracked up. I cracked him up to be. He really, really did a nice job. Talked about gunners being an issue here. Fitzpatrick remains with the ones. But as I'd hoped, Watts is now running with the ones on the gunners. And I need to watch him again. But I have a lot of hope for Watts overall in this role, as well as potentially on defense next year. Who knows? Coach Tomlin said that he wanted a cleaner game, more cleanliness. I think we definitely saw that. It wasn't, compared to last game, botched punt returns, penalties, center quarterback exchange. That stuff was better. Execution wasn't necessarily. And then I mentioned some stats. So some of these halftime stats, Russell Wilson ended the game 8 for 10 for 47 yards. Ugh. Trubisky, 9 for 13 for 86 yards and a pick. Bad one. Ugh. Van Jefferson, 4 first-half targets. Okay, I mean, I know Pickens wasn't going to be out there the whole time, but I think it's pretty clear he's the 2. Herbig, really good game by him. 6 first-half tackles, sack and a half, and a tackle for loss. These are all halftime stats. But on the other hand, Rousseau for the Bills had 2.5 sacks at the half. And these guys he didn't play after that. Yards per play at the half. 3.4 for the Steelers, 4.1 for Buffalo. Rushing yards. Steelers had 50, Buffalo had 42 at the half. But how about third downs? Steelers were 1 for 7. Buffalo 1 for 6. And Tomlin mentioned the possession downs weren't good enough. They absolutely weren't. I'll get to that in a minute too. Time of possession was about equal at the half. So we finalized the game. Yards per play, the Bills were at 4.5. Steelers at only 3.8. Both teams were 0 for in the red zone, of course. The Buffalo got there 3 times. The Steelers got there twice. So here we go. Third downs. Steelers end up 4 for 13. Bad. Buffalo 2 for 10. Also bad. Steelers 0 for 3 on fourth downs, though. One of which was in the red zone, as you know. And you guys know me. Not converting on fourth down or missing a field goal is the same thing as a turnover. So if you look at the turnover differential in this game, it looks like The Bills had 1, the Steelers had 0. But the reality is the Steelers had 4 and Buffalo had 1. A missed kick that led to points, leaving points on the table with a missed 4th down as well in the red zone, as well as 2 others. Now, I don't blame Tomlin for not going for that, by the way, or for going for it, but it was also a pretty predictable play call. Yards per rush, the Bills averaged 4.9 per carry. Steelers only at 3.9, and that includes Fields, scrambles, and whatnot. Ray Davis, who we mentioned, 8 carries for 58 yards and was a handful. No Bills player had more than 2 catches in this game. I'm sure some of the stories out of Buffalo are, wide receivers and receiving group overall were bad, but it was also a good corner day for the Steelers. So that's all I got. I know it's kind of sporadic. It's just notes all over the place, but that's my first reaction. It's late. Tomorrow we'll have a more refined second look at things. Take care.